All right, welcome back to the podcast. Joining me, as always, the ever-curious Jenny.
Hey, Mark. Always ready to dive into the tech world, especially when there's a bit of drama involved. Or maybe just some interesting design missteps.
Oh, there's definitely something to talk about today. We're tackling something that's been causing a bit of a kerfuffle in PC building circles lately. The ASUS Q-Release Slim mechanism. You know, that little lever on some of their motherboards that's supposed to make taking out your graphics card supposedly super easy?
Right, the one where you just push a button or a lever instead of, doing that awkward finger yoga trying to get at that standard little plastic clip that always seems to be hidden behind your giant GPU cooler heatsink.
Exactly. The concept is pretty neat on paper. It's supposed to be a real quality of life improvement, especially with how chunky and large modern graphics cards have gotten. But it seems like for some people, it's been less effortless and more, oof, what was that noise? Or worse, why are there scratches?
Oof, what was that noise and why are there scratches? As in, it's actually scratching the precious contact pins on their graphics cards? That sounds expensive.
Yeah, that's the big complaint that bubbled up. We've seen quite a few reports, especially from communities like Reddit, where users are showing pictures of their GPU contact pins getting visibly scratched or even potentially damaged when using this Q-Release Slim lever to remove their cards.
Wow, that's genuinely concerning. We're talking about potentially damaging a component that, as you said, can cost hundreds, if not thousands of dollars. What exactly about the mechanism is causing this issue? Is it like a sharp edge or something?
So based on user reports and teardowns, the initial design, particularly on some of those earlier boards that had the feature, seems to have had a small metal flange. It's essentially a little bit of metal that's exposed on the upward-facing part of the latch mechanism. When you activate the lever to release the card and start pulling the GPU out, that little metal piece can make contact with the delicate pins or the surrounding area on the GPU's connector.
So it's like a tiny, slightly abrasive edge rubbing against a particularly sensitive and crucial area? That does sound like a recipe for potential disaster, or at least unwanted cosmetic damage.
Pretty much. And the thing is, PCIe slots are designed to pretty strict mechanical tolerance standards, They're built to withstand repeated insertions and removals without causing damage to the components. This Q-Release Slim, in its original form, appears to have intentionally or unintentionally deviated in a way that's causing this mechanical interference. It's meant to be about easier release, not unintended abrasion.
Okay, so there's a potential design flaw that's manifesting in actual physical damage to a very expensive part. How has ASUS responded to all of this noise? Have they, officially acknowledged the problem and offered a fix, or a statement, or anything?
Here's where it gets a bit complicated. And honestly, maybe a little frustrating for the consumers who experienced it. The response hasn't been completely uniform, across the board, across different regions. Initially, at least some official statements, like from ASUS North America earlier this year, downplayed the issue somewhat, claiming there was no functional impact.
No functional impact? Even with visible scratches and reports of potential damage affecting how the card might seat later? That just seems kind of dismissive, doesn't it?
It does, doesn't it? Especially when you compare that to how their division in China reportedly handled it. We've seen reports that ASUS China was actually offering motherboard replacements for affected users. That's a pretty significant difference in approach, No functional impact on one side versus, let's replace the whole board that might be causing this on the other.
That's a massive inconsistency in how they're treating their customers based purely on geography. It really does, I think, erode trust when you see such different responses depending on where you happen to live. Why do you think there's such a disparity like that?
It's hard to say for sure without being inside those internal meetings. But it could be a mix of factors. Maybe differing regional legal requirements, different levels of pressure from the PC building community in those specific regions, or perhaps even just a bit of a breakdown in consistent communication within a large global company. Whatever the exact reason, it's not a good look, right? It unfortunately creates this perception of tiered customer support, which is never ideal.
Definitely not. So have they made any actual physical changes to the mechanism in newer boards? Because I can't imagine, with this feedback out there, they'd keep selling boards with a known potential issue like this without some kind of revision.
That's the good news, thankfully. It does seem that after all the community feedback, the forum discussions, and the noise around this, ASUS has revised the Q-Release Slim mechanism. The newer versions, like what you might find on boards manufactured and rolling out more recently, appear to have that problematic metal flange either filed down during manufacturing or maybe removed entirely in the design.
Okay, that is a relief for future buyers. So the problem should essentially be solved for people buying new boards now? But what about the people who already have the potentially problematic boards? The ones manufactured before the revision. Are they just out of luck?
That's still a bit murky, honestly. While there's evidence of revised hardware making its way into the market and some regional replacement programs that have popped up, a widespread, consistent, global recall or exchange program for all affected customers everywhere hasn't been officially announced as far as we know. It appears that if you're experiencing issues with an older board, reaching out directly to ASUS support in your specific region is probably the best bet. But as we discussed, your mileage may vary quite a bit depending on where you are.
That's a tough situation for those early adopters, for sure. It does highlight the power of community feedback and sharing experiences, though, doesn't it? If users hadn't been reporting this on forums, sharing pictures, and showing the evidence, do you think ASUS would have even made those revisions to the mechanism?
That's a great point, Jenny. I strongly suspect that community pressure played a significant role here. Seeing multiple users independently reporting the exact same kind of cosmetic damage or even functional issues on platforms like Reddit and tech forums created a critical mass of visual evidence that was increasingly difficult for the company to overlook or simply dismiss as isolated incidents or user error. It really does underscore that user feedback, when amplified and shared, can genuinely influence corporate decisions and force these kinds of revisions, even after a product has launched.
Indeed. It's a good, maybe slightly painful, reminder for companies that when users speak up, particularly with evidence, they really should listen and investigate properly. So looking ahead, do you think this specific incident will impact how other motherboard manufacturers approach designing their own PCIe slot mechanisms or other quick-release features?
I would sincerely hope so. This whole situation, while not a catastrophe for everyone, is a very public cautionary tale, isn't it? It might push other manufacturers to be much more cautious and perhaps more rigorous with novel quick-release designs. Maybe they'll lean towards more traditional or proven robust methods for critical components, or at the very least, do much more extensive and rigorous long-term testing for mechanical wear and tear and compatibility before bringing these features to market.
And maybe even lead to improved industry-wide standards for these kinds of mechanisms to help ensure what happened with the Q-Release Slim doesn't happen again across different brands?
That would be an ideal outcome, wouldn't it? Standardizing the mechanical tolerances for these added features and ensuring that these convenience innovations don't inadvertently compromise the physical integrity of the core components they interact with would definitely be a win for everyone, manufacturers and consumers alike. We've even seen some patent filings from ASUS themselves for what they're calling Q-Latch Pro, which appears to incorporate some screw reinforcement alongside the quick release, which suggests they're certainly thinking about more belt and suspenders, hybrid approaches now, combining convenience with a more secure connection.
Interesting. So it sounds like this whole situation, while genuinely frustrating for some of the users affected by the earlier design, might actually lead to some positive, longer-term changes in how these sorts of convenience components are designed and implemented across the industry in the future.
Here's hoping, right? It's a good, if somewhat painful, example of how even seemingly small design elements can have notable impacts, and how important it is for companies to both actively listen to their user base and times have consistent, transparent responses when issues are reported. It's a learning experience for ASUS, and I think potentially for the whole industry.
Agreed. And for anyone out there listening with an ASUS board featuring the Q-Release Slim, especially an earlier model that might have been manufactured before the revisions, maybe just be extra careful, a little gentle, when removing your GPU. And if you see something, document everything, take pictures.
Excellent advice, Jenny, absolutely. Well, that about wraps up our look at the ASUS Q-Release Slim situation and its implications for today. Thanks for joining me to unpack all of this, Jenny.
Always a pleasure, Mark. A little bit of tech drama mixed with learning is my favorite kind of segment, and thank you to all of our listeners for tuning in and thinking along with us.
We'll catch you all next time on the podcast.